All right, in this video, we are going to talk about sharing a model across multiple scenes. So I'm just going to run this for you at first, and we can take a look at it, what it does. And a lot of it is set up. Here I just have in the first scene where I can enter a value into the model. So when I pressed enter there, it goes into the model. And then I have this next button here where I switch to scene 2, and then I can switch to scene 3, and so on and so forth. So I can switch back and forth. Right now, you can't really see that anything is being shared, and in fact, it isn't, right? As soon as I navigate away from scene 1, then that model is gone the way I have it set up right now. But I want it to persist, across scene 2. And eventually, what I want to do is to have a label here that shows what value is stored in the model. And when I click across here, and I want that to be preserved as I navigate through the application. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Let's take a look at the model. It's very simple. It just has a string as the value in there, and then I have get and set method to access and modify that field. All right, next up over here in the controller, for scene 1, I have this code that I talked about in a previous video about how to switch scenes. I might have several or a couple, at least a couple different versions of how this would go. It's very, very simple to the code that's in the here in the standard app. And you can see that's all done at one line. But whenever I want to do what I'm about to do to share that model across a scene, what I want to do is kind of do that in separate lines, like in this example right here. So I can get at this loader object. And with that loader object, I'll be able to communicate with the controller for the new scene. So that's why you want to do that in this manner. All right, down in this, in scene 1, I have a field up here for the model, and then I initialize that in the initialize method here, like we talked about before, to get that set up. Okay, and I think that's all I wanted to say about this particular one. Here, you actually, with the text field here, you can see that code is entering the whatever I type in that text field in the first scene, that's getting entered into the model. All right, so next up in scene 2 controller, you can see that there's really no mention of the model there. It's just the code to switch over to scenes 2 or back to scene 3 or back to scene 1. In the scene 3 controller, I just have the code to switch back to scene 2. Okay, in your application, it might be different. You might have switch through multiple different scenes, and so you'll have to adjust accordingly with yours. Okay, so now let's get to work on this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to create a place for the model to go. I want scene 1 to pass the model to scene 2. So I'm going to have a field up here, just like I did for scene 1, right? When I created the model, I had it up here. So scene 1's going to hand that off to scene 2. It has to have some place to go. And same thing over here for scene 3. So that's what I'm going to do on each of those. Okay, and next up, I am going to have a set method in there to set the model. So I'm just going to go down here and public void set model, and the type is model, and this dot model equals model. So this is just going to allow me to set this field up here from another location. And where I'm going to end up doing that from is in scene 1. So in scene 1, when I'm getting ready to switch to scene 2, I'm going to do all this stuff. Then I'm going to contact the controller for the new scene and tell the new scene, hey, call that set model method over there, and I'm going to pass the old model to the new model, or to the old model. Sorry, I'm going to pass the model from the old scene to the new scene, and I'm going to call that method the set model method. All right, I'm going to have to do the same thing over here in scene 3. So I forgot the parameter on that. So all right, so but this is just a set method for that field. So okay, all right. So next up is let's go ahead and actually do the part where we pass that over. I think everything is good now. So where I'm going to do that here, I'm handing this is in the scene 1 controller. So now I want to pass everything off to the scene 2 controller. So right before I get ready to show that the new scene with its stage.show, I'm going to use this loader object that I created up here in this previous line. And so I'm going to do loader dot, and then the method is get controller. Okay. And on this one, it's 2 L's there. What you're going to need to do is to put the type of that controller object here. That is going to be scene 2 controller. So we'll create this scene. When you load up that scene using this loader up here and everything, what is going to happen is that it's going to create that controller object, and this allows you to get a handle on that controller object. And then what we want to do is to call the set model method, right? And we want to pass the model from scene 1 into scene 2, right? Via the set method right here. All right, so if I run that, that should work, just to check to make sure I didn't mess anything up here. I still should be able to switch scenes back and forth. I'm going to enter a value into the model here, right? And then click on over to next right here. And you can see that the label didn't update. We're going to have to do that ourselves. So it's hard to see right now that it actually did pass it, the model over. But here we're not seeing any errors, which is good. So okay, so what I want to do to show that, right, is to actually update that label in scene 2. To update the label in scene 2, what I'm going to have to do is to put a method in there called update label. So public void update label. And in that method, I'm going to just tell the label in this scene, right, which is called label lowercase l. And I'm going to do set text to change its text. And then what I'm going to change it to is whatever value is in the model. So that would be model dot, and in our model, we just have that get method, which I think is called get words, right? Yeah. So we're going to get the string out of the model using the get words method. And so we're going to tell this controller back in scene 1 over here when we're creating the new scene. Here in this line, we told that controller to update the model, right, and to the version of the model that we were handing off to it. So now that we have the model loaded up, we can do a similar thing, get controller dot update label. So that will update the label to whatever the in scene 2 controller with whatever values in the model. Let's see, yes, typo there, it's controller. Okay. All right, so now when we run this, right now the model would be empty, nothing in there. I'm going to enter some text in there and hit enter. So that should update the model. So now if we did everything correctly, when we hit next over there, the label should be updated, right, with whatever value is in the model there. Now, watch what happens when we switch to scene 3, right? That doesn't happen because we didn't do that for scene 3. And then now when we switch back to scene 2, it's gone, right? So you can see it's not in there. So every time you hand off to a new scene, you're going to have to do this updating in there, okay? All right, to finish this up, keep going. So we did this for scene 1 controller. I'm going to take these two, set model method and the update label method, and put them over in scene 3. Well, the set model was already there. All right. And then in scene 2, I'm going, scene 1 controller, right? I am going to take those 2 lines where I communicate with the controller, and I'm going to put that into the one for scene 3 over here. And now I will have to update right here instead of scene 2 controller, since I'm passing this to scene 3. I'll need to update that to scene 3 controller. Okay, so let's try that, and now the model should be passed. So again, here the model is empty. I put a value in there, and I click next. It should show up in scene 2, and scene 2 has now access to the model. And then when I hit next, it should show up in the scene 3 again. There it is, right? But now when I go back to scene 3, right, I'm going to have that same issue, right? It's not there anymore, right? So I need to add that same code back to into scene 3 controller. So here, when I'm going from scene 3 to scene 2, I need to do the same thing. All right, let's see. So now it should persist. So there, I entered that into the model, so it should persist to scene 2, scene 3. Now when I go back to scene 2, it's still there. But now when I go back to scene 1, right, and then go back, you can see that it's gone, right? The value is gone there. And so what happened is that, number 1, we didn't hand off anything from scene 2. When we went back to scene 1, we didn't hand anything off there. So that would be right here on scene 2 controller. Oops. So we would need to do that. Here. And then update this to scene 1. You're going to call it. And then there was no update label. I didn't have a label to update in scene 1, so I can get rid of that line. And I'm missing the set model method, so I need to add that back to the scene 1 controller. So I can just get that right here. One thing worth noting too is that every time you go back to scene 1, this initialize method is going to be called when you're setting up the scene. So that's going to create a model that has nothing in it in there. And you may say, hey, don't I need that in scene 2 or scene 3? And the answer is no, you don't really need that in there. The way this app is structured. Now yours might be different, but whatever scene that you're opening up on, if you're sharing the model across multiple scenes, you're going to have to create it there like this, but not necessarily in the other ones that you pass it to. Okay, as long as you make sure that you actually are passing it through there. So, all right, so I need to add this set model in there, and then I think we're good. So now as I navigate back and forth through the app, then I should be keeping that value. And then if I change it here, that value again should be going through. Okay, so that's it for this example. The code, both the starting code and the ending code is going to be posted on GitHub if you need it. So, and if you have any questions, let me know.